In today's episode, I'm talking about the Anti-CRT action plan. So let's get started. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so that you will get notified of future videos when I come out with them, which used to be twice a week, and then it was like once a week, and now it's like once every 2 weeks or every month. But it's, I do a couple at a time and then I wait a little while because life happens, and then do a couple more. So I just hope that you'll subscribe and that you'll see future videos and let me know what you think. So CRT, I'm not going to go into that whole definition because that has been hashed out. I'll just kind of skim over it here. We know, for those who are on the left who like to say, CRT is not being taught in schools. You people just don't want to talk about race because you're racist and you just don't want to talk about racial injustice in our history. That is not the case. People who are against CRT totally admit that there's a racist history. I mean, going all the way back to we founded this country and all the white people thought they could just go out west, manifest destiny and all that, and they enslaved the black people, and then even after slavery was over, they put these laws in place to keep them continuing to work for like just measly amounts of money, and not wanting them to own property and not wanting them to buy houses or live near in certain parts of the neighborhood, or there's all these issues all throughout our history. We know that has been caused by racism. But when people say CRT is being taught in schools, what they're talking about is basically the mindset of the teachers who are teaching. So that's what I want to address, because here's the thing. You can't really say we don't want CRT in our curriculum. You'd have to be very specific about what's in the curriculum. And there are some things you can definitely look at in the curriculum. So kind of what do I think we should be doing if we are trying to not allow CRT to really take its foothold in our education more than it already has, because it already has quite a bit. And again, when I say CRT, I'm talking about this whole umbrella of like this intersectionality, this idea that white people are inherently racist, and all of the systems of this country were built on racism, and that there is no hope for just reform. No, we got to burn it all down. We got to tear it all down and completely do something different. Build something different in its place, which is communism. That's what they want. They want to build communism in its place. So what do I think we ought to do? Well, the first two steps are kind of interchangeable, and they kind of depend on where you live and how much of a foothold you think it has already gotten in your school system, in your curriculum. Number one is to run folks on for your next school board election against the people who are, the leftists or the racists, the folks who are promoting this idea of segregating again, that we need to have separate spaces for people of color to feel safe from white people. The people who are promoting the idea that a white person is inherently dangerous and oppressive, that kind of thing, the school board members that are promoting that are the ones that you need to run against. So number one, and again, this could be number two, because 1 and 2 could be changed depending on what you think is the most important. Replace those school board members. And number 2 has to do with just fighting on the basis of the First Amendment against anything that's being taught as proselytizing. So let me just use myself as an example. I used to be a teacher, and I'm a devout Christian. And I don't mean I'm devout but I'm better than anybody. Like, I'm super devout. I'm so devout. What I mean is, I'm so steeped in my religious beliefs that it affects the way I see every individual. Right? It affects how I think humans naturally behave. It affects the way I read history. My religious views color everything. I'm allowed to believe that. I can believe it. And this really I saw this a few months ago. Someone, posted this picture of this guy and it made the news. Like, this guy writes white supremacist literature. He's written white supremacist, I don't even know, I didn't read like if he had published stuff in a book or was like blog posts, or if it was like just his personal diary and someone found it or something. But apparently he was like a 5th grade teacher, and they were like, imagine the way this person probably treats his children of color in his classroom. And I'm like, that is exactly what people who promote CRT are doing in reverse. And they're like, well, that's okay, because the children are already, the white children are already part of the power structure of the country. And so it's not wrong to take them down a couple of notches. But the children of color are already oppressed. And so it is evil to think less of them because they're already, okay. We got to go to the theory. The theory is this guy has these beliefs about race, and over here, these people also have these beliefs about race, and they're just direct opposites. The problem is not what he believes. The problem is what he says and what he does. If he does not say anything derogatory to children who are minorities in his class, and he does not treat them any differently or grade them any differently, then you can't, it doesn't matter what he believes if you think he is a white supremacist. Same thing with a critical race theorist. Same thing with a religious person, a Muslim person, a Christian person, an atheist. It doesn't matter what they believe in their heart of hearts about the children they're teaching. What matters is what they say and how they treat those children. So as a Christian, I could have looked at all my children. I could have thought, I pray for you every day. You know, I think this in my mind. I couldn't say this out loud. I just want Jesus to save them. I pray that they are convicted of their sin and believe on Jesus to be their Savior. But I couldn't have said to them, all right, kids, everyone stand up. We're all going to say together, I'm a sinner and I believe Jesus died for my sins and rose from the grave. You got to say this now or you're going to get a bad grade. Like, I couldn't have done that. You can't do that in a classroom when it comes to whiteness. You can't say, and my white people, you know, white ancestors have been oppressors, and I'm part of an oppressive group, and right now I pledge to, you know, abandon my whiteness, yada, yada, yada. That kind of stuff is being done in this country in K through 12. It is already being done. That's what you've got to fight. When I talk about, if people say speech codes, and you're like, but hold on now, I'm a libertarian. I want free speech. Everybody's got to have free speech. Free speech is to protect an individual against the state. It allows you to go to your school board meeting and rail against the school board because you're an individual citizen of this country. Free speech is to protect you. Free speech does not protect the person employed by the state operating in that capacity. They are not protected by free speech in that capacity. Otherwise, you know, I could proselytize for Christianity in the classroom in a public, but I can't. You can't do that. You're not protected by free speech in just all ways under the sun as a teacher. So that would be number 2. So the school board and the fighting against anything that's being said in the classroom, and which is going to involve some parents being willing to either, you know, talk to their kids, really get their kids to snitch on their teachers, or say, I'm coming into the classroom to observe. And, you know, if I got to wear a mask to do it, I'll do it. You've got to be willing to get in there and assert your right as a parent and assert that teachers don't have a right to force kids to be indoctrinated in a certain way. So those are kind of like the first 2 steps. The next step, I would say, if on just a personal kind of local level, county by county level, is to relearn about classical education and start making propositions to reinstate some of these teachings back into education. We've moved so far away from this in public education. And I'm homeschooling my eldest daughter this year. She's going to be a 7th grader, and she's participating in Classical Conversations, which is it's a worldwide program based in the U.S., so it's pretty popular here in the U.S., but there are some pods, I guess, around the world. And there's a lot of other classical models for homeschool and private schools all around the country. So you may say, well, I'm thinking about homeschooling my kids. I would strongly encourage you to look into classical education. I'm going to read you just a couple of little bits here at the very beginning of this book. This book just talks about, it says the movement sweeping America. This came out in 2015, and it's only 123 pages long. So if you're interested in just reading up on classical education, you know, kind of get a flyover view of it, this would be a good book. And I myself, I'm only a quarter of the way through. So, but I've already read some stuff in it that I was like, man, this is good. So let me read just a few little bits of what I read that stuck out to me. So this is the very beginning of the book, from chapter 1, page 1, The Lost Content of Learning. John Dewey, 1859 to 1952, was the most important modernist education theorist. He believed it more important to teach the process of learning than the content of what was learned. For example, children should be taught how to read, not what to read. A theory that, like many works of modern art, divorced form from content. The words of Homer, Shakespeare, and Longfellow are unnecessary because Dick, Jane, and Spot could teach reading just as efficiently. At higher levels, the process approach to education taught children how to conduct experiments, but neglected what scientists had already discovered. They were encouraged to create their own art, but not to appreciate great art. Skills were put in conflict with knowledge. These modernist approaches cut back the role of the intellect by separating the process of learning, to which they devoted much attention, from the objects of knowledge, which they treated as provisional. Dewey's narrowly empirical and behavioralist approach to how we know ended up minimizing what can be known. It was decreed that education could no longer teach unchanging truths and ideals, because our learning processes and skills could never know such things. Over on page 6, it says, this is the heading, Multiculturalism. One trend in postmodernist education is the idea of multiculturalism. With few exceptions, this cliche has little to do with actually studying or appreciating other cultures. So you see, we as parents want to learn about and appreciate other cultures. Like, we're not racist, but this is the problem. Instead, it is a way to teach a kind of heavily politicized relativism. Postmodernists believe an individual's identity consists primarily in the qualities that make him a member of a group, a race or ethnicity, a gender, sexual preference, or some other collective identity. So multiculturalism starts out as a relativist assertion, like every culture has different ideas and beliefs that are true for it, then becomes a form of criticism. What makes you think your way of thinking about this subject is superior to another culture's way? And finally becomes an attack on Western civilization and American society. Your ideas about this subject reflect your upbringing in a culture that oppresses certain victim groups and gives power to certain oppressor groups. A genuine comparison would reveal that cultures share universal elements. Greatly different cultures may hold common attitudes toward love, family, sexual morality, and property. Further scholarly study would disclose that most non-Western cultures favor social practices that would embarrass or offend radical feminists, homosexual activists, or environmentalists. But multiculturalism is not scholarship. It is a latter-day romanticism, a particularly Western mode of thinking. Multiculturalism projects a nobility onto other cultures in order to denigrate the Western heritage. At the same time, it is obsessed by the suspicion that behind every good intention in our society lies a disguised desire to oppress. And finally, I'm just going to quote one other part here. Chapter 2 is the elements of classical education. So chapter 1 kind of gives you this backstory of how we've diverged from where we used to be, and kind of comes back here with chapter 2 saying, well, what is classical education? Since we really don't know what it is anymore. Classical education cultivates wisdom and virtue by nourishing the soul on truth, goodness, and beauty. The ancient Greeks and Romans recognized that free citizens require an education that enlarges the mind and cultivates the soul. They believed that the cultivation of virtue, knowledge of the world and of human nature, active citizenship, and practical action all demand this purpose-driven education. When Christianity was planted in the soil of the classical world, its adherents found what was good and true in classical thought, purged out the dross, and handed on the rest to their heirs. In recent decades, as the classical renewal in education has matured, we have sought to understand its nature and secrets and to discover its essential ingredients. This essay proposes 4 elements that define classical education and that provide the ground on which we must meet the coming trials. Number 1, a high view of man. Number 2, logocentrism, which I'll explain that right quick. The commitment to a logos that makes ultimate sense of the cosmos and makes knowledge possible is expressed in the much maligned word logocentrism. According to a logocentric view of the universe, organized knowledge can be discovered, arranged, and even taught. The third element here is responsibility for the Western tradition, and the fourth is a pedagogy that sustains these commitments. So in classical education, they're going to talk about later the trivium and the quadrivium. And the trivium is this basic idea, and sometimes it's shown in like these circles, like the Venn diagram kind of circles. But I like the image of a tree, and the roots are grammar. There's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So the root is grammar, and this is what you teach to the young children, like grammar school. And it really has to do with just knowing basic facts, learning by rote, that kind of stuff. Then you have logic, which is the trunk of the tree. And logic is making sense of the facts, finding out how things work together, why things are the way they are, that kind of thing. And that's kind of that middle school, upper elementary, middle school type years. And then the rhetoric is like the branches and the leaves. And it is invention. It is taking what you've learned so far and then creating your own, really having debates and discussing things and coming up with your own ideas, that kind of thing, and the experimentation phase of all that. So you build from one to the next. So that kind of focus on classical education, I think we should try as parents to stress to our school boards to bring back in school. And the final step, I would say, again, we have the school board, we have the going up against any sort of speech that we hear that our teachers are using that reeks of that CRT that we could combat on a constitutional level. Number 3 is pushing for classical education in that K-12 arena. But the fourth is a much more long term. If you're part of an organization now that's trying to kind of like save public education on the K-12 level, you have to understand that what we're seeing now is the fruits of something that has been planted back in like 50 years ago, 60 years ago. I mean, you have to remember that the critical theories started, well, they started 100 years ago, but really got implanted into our universities 60 years ago. And slowly over time began to kind of spread their tentacles into all these other subjects and studies and sciences, and have now even affected the people who are just being churned out as K through 12 educators. They're being brought up in these critical theories. And if you want to combat it on our K-12 level and ever do more than just stick your finger in the dam, right? That's what all these steps 1 and 2 are primarily sticking the finger in the dam. 3 is has a little more pervasive, pushing for that classical education to be taught. But ultimately, you have to repair the dam or build a new dam or something, because you can't just keep sticking fingers in it. What's on the other side of that dam is what's being taught at the university level. And that's churning out the teachers by the thousands, who are then one day going to wind up on textbook committees where they're going to start putting this stuff in textbooks that we don't want, right? Like right now, people can say, well, critical race theory is not being taught in schools. You idiots, you racist white parents. There's no CRT being taught in schools because it's not in the curriculum yet, right? That is the last step. Like, we can't just say we got to save our kids today, this school year. This is like something we got to look long range at. So, at the very least, I'm going to really be thinking about what the colleges are teaching that my children are looking at as they get older, and they're kind of thinking about what they want to major in college, or if they want to go to college. I mean, heck, I might say go to a trade school. just just go work. Like, avoid getting your brainwashing in college, because who knows what they're going to be teaching there in the next 10 years. So, but anyway, as we look ahead, like, you got to have these plans of action in your mind. It can't just be this one thing this month or this school year, and then whew, we can breathe. You know, if we can elect another conservative administration in the, you know, in Washington, then we can breathe easy. No, 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 no. This is a long-standing thing that's been coming down from through academia for 50 or more years, and it's a long game that you're going to have to kind of work against if you want to try to roll back that tide or make that pendulum swing more toward the middle again. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for listening to me read. Again, this book is Classical Education, written by Dr. Gene Edward Veith Jr. and Andrew Kern, edited by Dr. Brian Phillips, and I'll put that information in the description below. And I hope you'll join with me in continuing to strive for quality, high quality education for your children, and kind of maybe think ahead of how you personally can be part of implementing these steps and working towards getting an equal education for all students, an education which values all students, that seeks to push them to be their best and contribute their best, and to work together and to have rigorous debate, right? The education these days, they're trying to stifle debate. It's about don't debate it, just say what we want you to say. And you got to work against that. So thank you so much for watching. Please share this with other people. Please remember to like my video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see y'all next time.